Well, here to ask this and other questions, we asked Leslie Hall, the principal of Iced Media. So please welcome Leslie and her panel.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Maya, for assembling such an amazing group of practitioners here, and we are all very excited to be here with you. Is influencer marketing and ROI an oxymoron? I think myself and the folks here hope not, otherwise we might all be out of jobs. Obviously, that's a joke, but I will start by introducing myself and then let each one of our panelists introduce themselves as well. I am Leslie Hall. I'm the president and founder of Iced Media, a digital marketing agency that I started 18 years ago, so have been doing influencer marketing for a really long time for a lot of global and Fortune 500 clients like Walmart and L'Oreal. I'm going to pass to each one of the panelists to introduce themselves, share who they are, what organization they're representing, how they work with influencers, and they don't know this, but what I'd also like each one of them to do, just to share a little bit more about themselves, is if they were to be an influencer themselves, not in the business marketing category, but in another realm, what kind of influencer would they be? I will kick off as a mom of two boys. I would be a cool mom influencer, and I'll go ahead and pass to Jody first.
Thanks. You stole mine. Hi, everybody. I'm Jody Harris. I head up consumer strategy and insights for Anheuser-Busch across a whole portfolio of brands from Budweiser, Bud Light, all the way to Goose Island, and as some of you from the New York area, Blue Point, you'd probably know. It's a wild and exciting time to be in marketing, particularly in insights. We're going through a huge transformation from traditional market research and measurement to really being stewards of business strategy. And so that's forcing us to evolve the way that we approach how we measure and plan for our campaigns, including, of course, influencers. So I'm excited to be here. And you stole mine. If I was an influencer, I think I would be some sort of a teacher to get people to experience different perspectives. I heard of a book called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry yesterday. Someone was talking about it, and I was like, well, wait a minute, actually, there's different perspectives and different lenses on life, so I think that could be cool.
Great, thank you. Greg.
Hi, my name is Greg Meyer. I'm the head of influence at Hyphen. We are a digital solutions agency who focuses on media, content, influence, and tech interactive. We work with influencers across a variety of categories, one of which is fashion retail, as evidenced by Sarah Ann Spalding, who is one of our beloved clients. And if I were an influencer, I think I'd be a blogger on how to make money with sarcasm.
Stole mine. Huh? Damn it. I'm Keith Pape. I'm the CEO of Yellow Pike Media. We're a small 10, 12-person influencer shop out of Los Angeles and London. Our clients are people like Chris at EA, Amazon Game Studios, Disney, Microsoft, those types. We do everything from content creation internally to influencer management, media buying, all the normal rigmarole. If I was to be an influencer, I would be like at Forrest Gump 2, and I'd be a travel blogger that would just run across the world and try to get all the way across and kind of document my journeys.
Hi, I'm Samantha Ski, and I'm president and CRO for She Knows Media. We own Blog Her, which is a very long-term, sort of strong legacy network of women bloggers and influencers, something we've developed over the past 13 years. Actually, She Knows bought it about 3 years ago, but the founders developed it very early with an eye towards creating a platform for women who produce content to share their voices. It was the nexus of what is now a 100,000-person influencer network that's pretty unwieldy and awesome and extremely passionate. So that's what I do. We also own a company called Stylecaster and a company called Hello Flow, both of which have relied largely upon influencers to build their audiences and to build value for brand partners. So if I were an influencer, I feel very strongly about television. So probably programming, which I consume way too much of, and then probably IPA beers. Sorry, dude. I know you got one. It's not very strong.
Beer influencer is an option? Hold on, I'm going back. You
guys got all heady.
Oh, damn it.
Okay. So I'm Sarah Ann Spalding, and I am the social media manager for Macy's, specifically private brand, and then this is an unofficial title of chief content editor. But just to specify, so I don't manage the @Macy's social accounts, but I manage all of the private brand accounts. So if you guys are Macy's shoppers, Inc. International Concepts, Alfani, Charter Club, Hotel Collection, there are about 17 that we have in our roster that sets us apart from our competition. I would say about 75% of my role as social media manager is tied back in some way to influencer marketing. So I've dabbled with micro-influencers, influencers who kind of bridge the gap between, are they a celebrity, are they an influencer? And then if I were an influencer, I would probably be, my side hustle is I'm a Pilates instructor. So I would love to be a fitness influencer in some respect, which I'm not, but maybe I need to work on that with my expertise that I have. So that's me.
A fitfluencer, that's great.
Yes.
So before we jump in, I just want to kind of level set in terms of a definition of influencer marketing that we'll use before we jump into questions. So when we think about influencer marketing, it's really kind of the idea of a brand or an organization that leverages partnerships with entities to co-create content, borrow equity, leverage a following or subscriber base to drive meaningful action in a way that they couldn't or wouldn't on their own. So for the purpose of today's discussion, we really want to hone in on the piece about driving action and how that lives contextually in terms of the KPI around driving action, and then how we talk about meaningful beyond a way that's just subjective. So for our first question, we want to talk about today's climate. Historically, when you think about influencer marketing, you really think about the size of the following that an influencer has generally in social media. So the number of followers they have, the size of their subscriber base. We know that we're in kind of this era where earned media is really dwindling, right? So, you know, for brands on social media, maybe they're reaching about 1% to 3% of their follower base organically. For influencers, maybe that's as high as 15 or 20%. So if we have any traditional marketers here, you know that if you're going to a television network or if you're going to a magazine and they're saying, okay, well, here's an insertion order and you're going to reach maybe a 15% audience penetration, that's pretty weak. So the question for the panel is, in this era of dwindling earned reach, when you're approaching an influencer and your expectation is that there's going to be a paid partnership, but the influencer can really only deliver on maybe 10 or 15% of their subscriber base that they're going to be able to reach, how does that impact the performance of the campaign? How are you measuring that performance? And what are you doing to offset the decline in earned reach that we're seeing today? And with that question, I'd love to start with Keith.
Oh, you set me up on that one.
Little bit. We got to know each
one
other,
coming from a
myself
phone
and all
call,
the panelists this week.
Trying to beat me up immediately. So I think one of the things you have to remember, and what we see a lot of is I think sloppy talent negotiation on influencer campaigns. The default, like Leslie was saying, is for people to look at the total subscriber base of an influencer and immediately start throwing dollars at it. I think what we've learned over time, and I've been doing pre-PR and everything else, true influencer marketing since about 2010, and what we've moved to is a model of looking at the reality. It doesn't matter what their subscriber base, it does matter what their reach is. So if they can only reach 15%, and you do that by looking at their last 6 weeks of content they put out, what is their actual engagement rate? How many videos are being watched? How many loops on their Instagram videos? How many likes are they getting? And that's what you should be negotiating the costs against. We see so many times people make the mistake of looking at subscriber rates instead of what's your real reach, And your value to our clients, brands, is who you can truly reach. And we just see a lot of really sloppy negotiation going on there and people being way overpaid versus what they can actually deliver to the campaign. And you need to bring the right amount of scale to that in order to meet those goals.
Sarah Ann, is that enough? Is the earned media that the influencer's getting based on their organic following enough to justify a partnership in today's climate?
No. So my take on influencer marketing and sourcing content from them is really that lately is where I'm not so much looking at what their audience is, but more so what content are they going to bring to the table? Is it in alignment with the brands that I'm promoting? Is it relevant and interesting to our audience? And then on the flip side, what we've been doing is in amplifying that content with paid media. So it's almost more for us of using the influencer as an extension of our creative team and our storytelling. Of course, their follower base is important and their engagement is important, but at least what I've been focusing on is using them as this source of new creative that we can then amplify and meet our KPIs through something that's a little bit more in our control, such as paid media.
So more of a content creator than really an influencer at this point.
Yeah.
Which I think Chris was talking to that right about before this, about really when they have less budget, you can only create so much creative, then really using them as an extension of your creative team and not so much the need for their personal audience, but you're just going to move it over to your channels or to your paid media plan.
Exactly. Like a lot of our Instagram strategies now for populating our feed is 90% coming from influencers. So yeah, it's more of like a sourcing of content. Yeah.
Do you take more control over what they do because they're now your creators? And what's the lashback on their subscriber base by them creating things that are kind of guided by you instead of what they would normally do day to day?
We try and pick people who we know the aesthetic is on brand for us so that we're not having to guide them so much on what they need to do because they're already naturally doing it. In order to kind of mitigate that, we've definitely in the past have dictated and been more subscriptive about what we want from them, but we've found that it's better to kind of give them general guide rails and let them create what is, most natural for them and what they know, to what Chris was saying before, what they know their platform, what their fans will respond to the most. So.
But it sounds like the ultimate goal is to really leverage influencers as part of your direct response campaigns, and you're really leveraging them as content.
Yes.
So content creators, and then the KPI is really that direct response KPI where you're comparing them to other content that you're using, and then that's the metric that you're using.
Right. So we might run a campaign and we have a set of our actual campaign, glossy, beautiful, creative, running against our influencer content and sort of like compare and contrast which one's performing better.
And generally, are you seeing influencer content outperform this glossy kind of, photo shoot, big production, fashion campaign content?
We have, I would say, so because I work in private brand, I get to dabble in a couple of different types of brands. So for instance, one of the brands that I've worked with Greg on, American Rag, which is our millennial bohemian brand, we found that our influencer content far and away outperforms anything that was shot in-house or at a photo shoot. Some of our more mature brands, maybe we'll see a difference. It's kind of hard to say depending on a given campaign. But yeah, overall, we have seen that our influencer content's been outperforming a lot of our campaign.
So it sounds like we're saying, essentially, yes, influencers are viable. Don't rely on their subscriber base to make important decisions about how much to pay them or what the reach of the campaign is going to be. Look for other channels such as paid media and or qualitative metrics around content to determine what the value is. And I think that brings up a really good point, right? One around data overload. I mean, you've got all of these different influencers who oftentimes have following bases. Maybe they're a big YouTube influencer, maybe they have a big following on Snapchat, maybe they have multiple channels where they have a lot of followers, many different KPIs on all of those channels, but then you've got brands that have a lot of different business goals oftentimes that are quite different than the KPIs that you're using to look at these different channels. So how is it that, you know, a brand is able to then kind of match their business goals back to the ways that you can actually measure social channel performance with influencers, to actually know, how do I choose the right influencer that's going to help me achieve my business goals? What are the benchmarks that I use to measure throughout my campaign? What are the right KPI to track? And then how do I know it was successful? And I'd love to ask that of maybe Jody could help us start that one off.
Yeah, sure. And I'm feeling exactly the same as you are. We're seeing a lot more traction with the content that's created with our influencer partners than some of the in-house digital, but I don't want to tell the rest of the team that. So I wish there was a perfect solution or a perfect way, the right way to create a campaign around influencers, but there isn't. That would be a lot simpler for us, but not as much fun. For Anheuser-Busch, we've been on this journey for quite some time. In fact, in the 80s, we sort of pioneered this sports marketing, influencer marketing space with sponsorship of athletes, with leagues, and even going into traditional celebrity music and television or the movies. But that was a long time ago. And in some cases, it still tends to work depending on the audience that we're trying to approach. But in many cases, it doesn't. And so we treat influencer marketing just like we would any other media channel. And very simply, we do think about reach, especially for a beer category. Yes, we have brands that have very high penetration and frequency, but in the grand scheme of things, when we're looking at, you know, other sort of CPG companies, there's still a lot more room to grow. So reach is actually still quite important to us, and relevance of the message, and of course the influencer fit. And we think about it along 3 different core tenets for all of our brands, and this is the brand strategy. What is the purpose? The purpose for us is a set of shared values, and we need to make sure whatever influencer or influencers we're working with need to have that core value system. So, for example, if I've got time, I'll go through a couple examples. Bud Light, we're really building the brand positioning around friendship and the core values of friendship and being open-minded and enjoying life in social moments with people that you love and new people that you want to meet. And we partnered with Lady Gaga. So in our camp, we think of her as an iconic talent or an iconic talent influencer. And it wasn't just us paying her to have her name, which we may have done in the past, but she actually helped create a whole program called Dive Bar Tour. And we've extended that to a few other influencers. Yes, you know, John Mayers of the world and G-Eazy's of the world, but also local influencers and smaller bands where they can start to, you know, get a little bit of their heyday in the sun. And we use traditional approaches. So pre-testing, even post-testing with, you know, our creative, because it does need to be in line with our CCI and whatnot. But we are dabbling in more, you know, new age things, which we would call like social listening, novel. But it's important, right? So we're starting to look at these heat waves of buzz and being able to capitalize on that. So to your point, there's a bit of humanity and emotion that's also coupled with the data. The second way we look at is the product itself. And how do we start to communicate benefits through influencers that matter and who are credible enough to talk about that? And we actually look inside our own 4 walls, and our brewmasters are starting to get a little bit of a celebrity status, especially in this growing space of craft beers and at-home brews and brew pubs and whatnot. And so really fostering, whether it's our own internal folks as those influencers, or fostering communities of people who just have a passion for beer or for brewing. And a lot of that comes with buzz. A lot of that comes with specific, and this is more traditional, but it's important, trade metrics. Right, so we might be targeting certain accounts. Again, alcohol sold through a 3-tier system. We don't own our own sales data, so that's also something that we have to be innovative with in terms of measurement. But looking at sales lift and looking at brand lift attributable to where we're focusing some of those influencer campaigns. And then the last would be on passion points. And so making sure that we're aligning our brands and the influencers through areas and platforms in which we can connect with consumers in places that matter for them. So sports, music, food, and most recently with our Michelob Ultra brand, creating micro communities, digital communities of influencers around active and healthy lifestyle enthusiasts. And similarly, this is the one we've been playing around with. We're getting a lot more traction, not just impressions, but a lot of engagement, and then that sort of ripple effect in terms of recommendation. And then lastly is innovation. So we've been partnering with some technology companies and some other sorts of agencies, social publishers, to retarget consumers and to embed brand surveys and polls very quickly so that we can measure pre and post the lift that we should see in terms of brand equity as well as persuasion.
It's interesting because we didn't hear you talk about kind of any of the, I think, more vanity metrics that we're oftentimes hearing, especially in the social space, whether it's things like earned media value, followers, engagement rate, which oftentimes have no kind of proven correlation to purchase intent whatsoever. So I think that's exciting to hear.
We do, though. I want to, because I think engagement, it gets a bad rep because it's a vanity measure. But in some cases where we don't have the data, engagement is actually a good signal to show if a brand or a message or an influencer is actually starting to build that relevancy factor. And so we know it does not correlate to brand health or to sales, but it is a good signal for us, and it's up to us to actually amplify that relevance and to turn it into something that could be much more profitable and commercialized.
So maybe it's not meaningful, but you'll use it as a proxy in absence of anything else? Okay, and Samantha, I mean, you kind of, as the representative, if you will, of kind of a big media company that, you know, is able to work with large-scale influencers and then have kind of the heft of a big media agency behind it, you know, how do you kind of address that with the brands that you're working with, right? Because you have the opportunity to bring in a much more consultative sale where, you know, you're not kind of one of these automated micro-influencer networks, right? You've got real people that are able to have conversations with your clients and talk about their very specific business goals and be much more thoughtful about the influencers that you're vetting. How are you approaching the vetting, and what types of influencers and criteria are you looking at based on the business goals of the brands you're working with?
Well, we stick to the areas in which we're strong editorially because we are melding a media company and a distribution to 50 million women together with a network of, you know, it's apparently 104,000 influencers as of yesterday. So summertime.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
Big milestone
Summer,
for
it's
you.
unruly. As mentioned, it's really actually hard to manage without perfect technology, and I don't think there is any perfect tech for influencer management right now in the industry. There's a lot of attempts, which are, you know, advancing, certainly automation, but it's just tricky to get all of the factors that ultimately produce influence into one platform. So anyway, we do have to be very deliberate about the subject matter. We're just not, like, we're not financial services. That's not an area in which we're authoritative from an editorial standpoint. So we don't have that much to offer, frankly, as partners, influencers who are endeavoring to build authenticity and, you know, incremental kind of authority in financial services. Our categories are style, family, fashion, food. It's, you know, it's women's lifestyle, so it's the softer topics. And so we start with that. We don't work with content creators who are not part of those verticals just because we can't serve them terribly well. We also don't take people who have fewer than 100,000 in reach. In aggregate, it's not deduplicated, so that's another, you know, faulty element of our assessment that, you know, we're trying to get cleaner on. And we used to represent everybody at Blog Her. It was like all comers, and it was cool because even people who had only 1,000 followers or only reached 1,000 people might have really strong influence and get engagement from like 60% of that group and really drive to purchase very productively because of their degree of loyalty. So, but we did have to cut that off. It was just too hard to manage the really, really small guys. So we'd look at reach, you know, the size, the product, our scanner for our sort of assessment table is subject matter relevance. It's reach, platform proficiency, looking at each platform and the relative proficiency, because you might be great on Pinterest and not terribly active on Twitter. Then we look at degree of engagement, and engagement is the standard vanity things. It's likes, it's shares, it's positive. Sentiment, because that's a biggie. You get lots and lots of comments when people are angry or unhappy. So we look at positive sentiment. We do look at, with retail partners, we have clicks to register, clicks to promotions, whether it's inside of Insta or YouTube. You can actually produce now that connection to bottom of funnel activities. So, but it's whack, like every day there's a new metric that we should be evaluating. And frankly, with each client, and this is not preferable in terms of scale, there's a range of value. There's the production of incremental content. There's the connection to huge influencers and also to like influencers who are really relevant in very specific micro markets. And as we start to work with brands, we see what's most interesting to them. And so it's a lot of humans involved, meaning on our team, there are a lot of people involved to ensure we're delivering the best value because there's so much potential value. So I'm actually looking to narrow what we do.
How are you teaching your clients how to evaluate the campaigns, though, at the end, right?
Yeah, well,
like, what are the benchmarks, and how do you know if it was successful or not?
Ultimately, I would say loyalty versus one-hit wonder because the one-hits can absolutely be like we work with Kim Kardashian at our last Blog Her event, and if she says a word or a product, it spikes, it trends, it gets. But that said, it's usually a one-off. It's not necessarily generating loyalty. So we look at longer-term engagement, kind of longitudinal value. The influencer confers back to the brand, and so that is a map of sort of engagement, but then also we do the pre and post. We do the sort of standard media metrics. We also look at the influencer's ultimate influence around a certain category, because I can influence beer choice, but certainly not like parenting, which is sad because I am a parent. But the people aren't necessarily looking to me for that advice. So I think we don't assume an influencer is influential over every category. She might be very, very productive in suggesting fast recipes, but not someone you go to for like discount, awesome high fashion shoes. So we do have those correlates that develop over time as well. And that's really what I guide people to look at, is the longer term. It might be just 6 weeks, but longer term engagement.
So it sounds like a lot of third-party tools like social listening and sentiment monitoring tools that are able to give you more of those insights that otherwise you wouldn't get just from, looking at public metrics or even the back-end tools.
You can do a few of those things with API integration, but yeah, we have we work with a lot of ad tech and insights tools, and third-party data.
Okay. And then in terms of direct attribution, you touched on that a little bit. I know, Greg, that's something specifically your firm focuses on. You do a lot of direct response campaigns with influencer content specifically. So I'd love for Greg to touch on that, and then the rest of the panel to chime in as well. Who is measuring direct attribution? Are any of your campaigns ROI positive? And we'll define that by either you are making money in terms of you're paying an influencer for a campaign, you're making more money from that campaign on either sales from the campaign or the lifetime value of the customer that's coming into your campaign for the first time, or coming into your brand for the first time from that campaign. So we'll start with Greg.
Thanks. I can't believe I've kept my mouth shut this long.
No longer.
So, yes, we at Hyphen look at influencer marketing as an organic plus paid strategy and relationship with that influencer. In the condition, we're having the fortune of having Sarah Ann here, who we work with. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is the condition your brand and business is in to actually make the decision around organic and paid. Chris is here from EA. He can put a piece of content creator content into their brand channels, and that guy gets famous. That doesn't happen for a lot of brands in a lot of categories. And in the private label business for fashion, we spent an entire year focused on organic, and we're big believers in the authenticity of the influencer and the content that they represent on our behalf among their fan base, but it actually wasn't getting us where we needed to go. We have a lot of mid to low awareness brands. And by the way, we're housed inside of one of the American retailers who is going through transition, I think is the way we call it. And that really led to a shift in strategy to still work with the influencer, allow them to do what they do best, but also allow that content to then go into paid for amplification, and not just of that particular post, but to actually lead consumers who we wanted to be new customers into the customer journey of becoming aware of, through this influencer, the clothes I liked, swiping through to see the clothes that I might want to buy or create that look for themselves, and then transact right from the platform. So now we have conversations where our metrics still have impressions. We talk about reach. We talk about engagement rate as a good flag, right? But we also have adds to cart. We have the number of click-throughs from that content. And we have total sales and a return on ad spend. And inside of a business climate where there's a lot of pressure on the money you're spending in marketing, and what are you really getting back in return? To be able to bring to the table the full funnel metrics and talk about return on ad spend is a great conversation to be in, and it really helps prove the point that social isn't just about organic content and people doing personal things with their connections. I mean, they are commerce platforms for all of us today. I can connect with a friend as easily as I can buy something without ever leaving the platform. And we love to live inside that reality, mostly because of our business conditions, what our objectives are, and our accountability to leadership to say, look, the money we're spending is working.
And is that really just on Facebook, or are you seeing that on other channels as well, in terms of where the media dollars are being spent at the bottom funnel?
Sure. Mostly for our brands, we're a Facebook and Instagram first place. We play in Snapchat when it makes sense. We play in Pinterest.
With Snapchat, is that the ad product where you can go directly to the e-commerce environment?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then, sorry, what was the last one you said after Snapchat? Sorry? I forget the name of the
I just
Snap
said-
ad product.
Yes, it's the, I also can't remember the name of it. Anyone in the audience?
WebView, maybe?
I don't think that's
Anyone? WebView?
it. Claire.
They need to work on the branding for that one.
They do.
You know, it's the Snapchat thing.
But yeah, it'd be the swipe
on
up.
your butt.
Okay. Did anyone else I think we're going to jump into audience questions. Anyone else want to chime in terms of direct response or attribution as it relates to sales or lifetime value?
Yeah, I'll jump into it just real quick. Because, as Chris was saying earlier on the EA side, where it's a very player-first content focused, the tide rises for all boats. We also work with clients that are, we'll call them one of the world's largest online retailers who may have started in books, where every program is about...
Is that Chewy.com?
Yes, actually pets.com. Yeah, the sock thing, it was really cool. Where every influencer campaign is tied to affiliate marketing links, requirements for number of mentions, and trackable links and markers and chatbots that all derive directly to revenue, and every single campaign is measured on what was the expense for each person or each influencer and creator, and how much revenue did they drive, and there's a very limited rope on how many attempts they get in order to build revenue before they're cut from the program. So there are definitely both ends, and they both can be very successful.
And you're seeing ROI positive?
Right. Everybody in the program for said possible book retailer is always ROI positive, or they're out of the program. They're given. There's always when you move from a purely organic content creation strategy as an influencer and you go to sponsored posts where there's links and you're driving revenue, there's always an adjustment period for the subscriber base to get used to the style. And so it takes a little bit. We usually see that their numbers drop off slightly from their kind of 6-week rolling average for engagement when they first start in the program. But as their as subscribers get used to it, we actually see their subscriber growth rate continues to go back to normal and the revenue starts growing and becoming positive.
And are you putting paid media behind it, or you're relying on the subscriber and follower base of the influencers?
Everything's done on subscriber and follower basis only. We just simply get more influencers, more creators, because our concept is the more creative iterations there are out there, the more impressions you have and slightly differentiated micro messaging, because you never know which impression is going to put somebody over the top.
Do you think if you put paid media behind that content, you'd be able to exponentially increase your return?
No, absolutely not. I think you'd actually reduce the amount of it, because I think the cost per transaction in the current environment for influencers is less than you're going to pay for the same paid media. And we actually compare, with this client, we compare their paid media spends, or they compare their paid media spends and ROI versus their organic, to make sure that we're at least on par, but we're usually about 2x what paid media is.
What do you think about that response, Greg?
I think...
You can be mean. I'm okay.
Okay.
I can save you if you want.
Well,
She's one further away. I can't even hit her from here, so she can say the mean things.
Maybe I'll just lean into the business condition or the reality that a lot of our clients face, and the solutions we can bring forward to them. Amplification and paid media is for some reason almost a dirty word in reference to influencers, because influencers were supposed to be these organic, authentic content creators.
And they are.
I still do believe that, but there's clearly room for partnership. And consumers tell you, and you find out very quickly if that partnership and the amplification of that partnership is acceptable or not.
I want you to know, I actually agree with you, and I want to differentiate just real quick, and this way you get to talk more too. I'm sorry. But I agree, like what Sarah Ann said, is that, and I think Chris even mentioned it, some people are really great content creators, and some are really great influencers. And I think the content creators are the ones that, when special, I think that's where amplification can really work for the brand's internal channels, because usually you're not both. There's some guys who are both. They're amazing content creators and they have massive followings. There's others who are amazing content creators and don't have the reach. And so being able to leverage it in that way by the brand through paid media really turns it into something special that they couldn't do on their own.
If I could just build on that too,
Please.
I think it's also looking across channels. So, we do a lot, obviously, in the online space, but if something's working, then there's plenty of opportunity to take that to a TV commercial, especially we did this with Michelob Ultra for the Super Bowl last year. And we were able to help the influencers. And yeah, of course, there's some that want to stay true to their craft, but there's others who do want a little bit of a celebrity and to expand into other spaces as well. So we're looking for those dual partnerships. And the one other thing I just wanted to mention is brand equity is the name of the game for us. Yes, we want to, of course, improve sales and whatnot, but as we're building that long-term value, that long-term equity of a brand, it may take years. We're not going to see that payoff in sales right away. And so we've been doing quite a bit of modeling and fine-tuning of our traditional market mix modeling, ROI, to incorporate what we're calling the return on equity. And so we've been able to start bringing in brand health attributes through working together with our big box agencies to start to understand which attributes, which types of influencers, what types of content, what sorts of channels can actually help pave the way, and where should we focus a little bit more.
Return on equity. I hope everyone wrote that down, because I think that's a new KPI we should all be thinking about.
I have one more, sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
On the distribution piece. So just something that Jody said made me think. Our influencers love to be incrementally published, so they like the idea of being distributed through like traditional digital media. In some cases, some of the content's not strong enough that it would appeal outside of their own kind of micro communities or communities, but especially through native. I hate to use the overused, saturated word, but if you're distributing, because we have a large lifestyle network, if we have a nice piece of content that's essentially a review or an experience or a personal story around something related to Bud Light, it fits beautifully into a native spot, and it doesn't that person's degree of influence over my 50 million audience is far less, but the content is still a review, it's still authentic, it's still a woman's voice, and it's indicated as sponsored, obviously. But I think it's in my experience, cheaper actually than what you'd pay an influencer. You can crank media if you have big, high volume, especially through automated channels.
Well, that was my point, right? I mean, it wasn't to kind of create this contention among the group, but it's this idea that, just summarily, I think Keith brings this very nice kind of purist view of influencer content and the authenticity that influencers bring to their own content on their own channels. I think there's also this nice philosophy at our agency, we call it influencer-led, where you think about influencer partnerships and influencer content much more holistically, and you think about the full digital ecosystem, sometimes even beyond digital, such as what Jody was talking about, right? You think about an influencer partnership, and you think about what does that look like in an email? What does that look like on a brand's website as part of their e-commerce channels, and so on and so forth? So I think there could be opposing views, but I think this group kind of aligned very nicely on the idea that there isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution to any of this. It's more about a brand really understanding what their goals are and leveraging influencers in a very thoughtful way in terms of how am I leveraging this particular opportunity in a way where I can measure it so that I know that at the end of the day, I'm helping to reach my brand goals in a way that otherwise I would not be able to do on my own. And with that, do we have any questions from the audience?
I think that was
Ross.
a fantastic way of summarizing this entire panel, by the way.